And the record button is smashed. Welcome to Podcast Titles or Spook. I'm your host, James Weeks, and today I am joined by a presidential candidate today. Got Mark Whitney here. Mark, why don't you tell the people about yourself for those who may not know who you are?
Hey, folks. I'm running for president of these here United States for the Libertarian Party. I'm excited because the Libertarian Party is the only party besides the Democrats and Republicans that have legit ballot access in all 50 states. And I ultimately decided to get into the race, ironically, due to private sector censorship by tech companies. And I'm concerned that we may be moving toward a world where citizen journalists are not allowed to be heard. I was just doing a show yesterday, the Drunken Disorderly show, and they complain of being shadow banned on a regular basis by YouTube and Apple, and so that was one of the things that got me off the couch. And I have been an entrepreneur for 40 years. I'm the CEO of a company called thelaw.net, which I started 20 years ago. And all of the subscribers to my software are attorneys. 2/3 of the stockholders of my company are attorneys. My wife just got her law degree in December, so I'm surrounded by attorneys. Jacob Hornberger is an attorney everywhere I look. So I'm okay with the rule of law. I'm not all right with the rule of lawyers. That's kind of where I come down. Yeah.
So, but you do, your business is providing, isn't it legal case to lawyers?
Yes. So if you're a lawyer, you need to have access to what they call primary materials, judicial opinions, statutes, rules, regulations. And when I started my company, it was very expensive for a lawyer, just a regular workaday lawyer on Main Street, to have access to all the law in the United States. And I lost a company in my 20s, and there was a lot of litigation that ensued. There was probably 20 lawsuits. And what I learned very quickly was that if you are a lawyer working for a bank or you're a lawyer working for the IRS or the Department of Justice, uh, that you're a lawyer who has access to all the law from coast to coast, all federal and state. So it gives you a big advantage over lawyers who are just, regular lawyers doing divorce or bankruptcy and DUIs and stuff like that, who can afford only to see the law in their state or primary jurisdictions. So what my company did is solve that problem. So, like, for what state are you in? I'm talking to you right now. Where are
In
you?
Michigan.
You're in Michigan, right? So if you're a lawyer, say in Detroit, and you want to see the law in Michigan plus your federal districts plus your primary federal circuit, the U.S. Supreme Court, if you go to one of my two big competitors, that's going to run you around $300, $400 a month. For $50 a month with my company, you can see all the states, all the feds on an unlimited basis, one size fits all. So it's really a company that was rooted in a grudge I had. It's really a company that has its that is fueled by revenge. I wanted to be able to level the playing field so that all lawyers would be able to see all the law and then let the best lawyer win. So it's really a company that sprouted out of my devotion to the 14th Amendment, which is all about equal protection of the law and access to justice for all citizens. And my software helps facilitate that.
So this is like a program that has a catalog of all these different cases. So how much? How you gotta have some big servers.
What's that? What do you laugh
I
at?
said
What's
you
that?
gotta have some big servers to host all that case law.
Well, there's about 7 million cases, and it doesn't, since the beginning of time, it doesn't take up as much space as you might think. If you've ever been into a real law library, there's usually 3 or 4 stories of books, just long, big shelves of books. But when you scrunch it down into text, it's not really that big of a deal. It was a big deal building the database, but maintaining the database is very process driven, and so it's been a really good thing for our subscribers. I think a good thing for America, because the way I marketed my service was with email. So we would send out about 1 million emails a week to the nation's lawyers. And even though a lot of those lawyers who work in big firms and for big governmental instrumentalities are not the prime suspect for our product, we did very much influence the way they think about legal research and how they think about the unfairness associated with the way two big companies, Westlaw and Lexus, they take the data that taxpayers have already paid for, the statutes, rules, and regulations, the case law. We already pay to have that stuff generated on our behalf. They take it and they massage it and they turn it into private sector databases, and then they sell it back to us for very usurious prices. And in an ideal world, all of this information would be free. And it is, to a large extent, free on the internet now. So, if there's a law that you know of that you just want to look up, that's very easy to do on the internet. If there's a case that you know of that you just want to look up, that's very easy. But if you want to be sure that you have, say, all the cases in Michigan that construe just the murder statute in Michigan, then you need to have a commercial database for that if you're a lawyer, because those opinions are unknown to you. So it's not like browsing through a list of known things. You have to be able to keyword search a database of unknown items, maybe, based on the statute that is defining your life in that moment as a lawyer. And that's what our software allows you to do, is pull up all those cases and look at them and decide which cases help or hurt you the most, which is what you need to know to advise your client.
Mm-hmm. So this helps a lot of defense attorneys look up case law and all that kind of stuff for.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bankruptcy lawyers, defense lawyers, lawyers in a small office who maybe just need access to legal research now and then, because a lot of lawyers that do estate practice and things like that, they're transaction lawyers. They don't do a lot of hardcore legal research, but when they do need to do it a few times a year, they're glad to have our software to do it inexpensively.
And so what made you go from that to deciding you wanted to run for president? Was it just this people getting shadow banned on Twitter and stuff like that kind of...
It's running for president for me is also about 1/3 a revenge play. I want to get even. But when I lost a company in the 1920s and I had to litigate with the IRS and the federal government and had to go to prison for a little while because I gave a couple of tax returns to the bank that weren't quite what they appeared to be. So I didn't have the money to defend myself. I got a court-appointed lawyer who had never worked a federal criminal case. He was a real estate lawyer primarily. And so I defended myself. I got convicted on some things, acquitted on some things, and the jury was hung on some things. And after I got sent away from my family 10 hours away to prison, I went to the law library. I had a high school education. I studied, and I turned myself into a really good constitutional lawyer, and so good, in fact, that I was able to litigate my way out of prison, get my sentence declared unconstitutional, beat the Department of Justice like a rented mule 3 times on appeal. That's the biggest law firm in the world. I negotiated an IRS debt from $1 million down to $20,000. And I've been really winning ever since for the last 30 years. Sound a little bit like Trump there. But what I learned in that experience was really how lopsided things are, that we really don't have a criminal justice system. We have a criminal conviction system. I am, and I have been since, an oppressed minority. I mean, if you look at my face, I look like, if you look up white guy in the dictionary, it's going to have my picture there. But the fact of the matter is the civil disability I have, a 30-year-old felony conviction. The state and federal government does to me things that nobody is allowed to do, say, to Chris Rock with his brown skin. You can do to me. You can keep me from renting an apartment. You can not give me a job. You can ostracize me from any type of social group just by saying the word felon. It has an incredible psychological impact. So it's really the sheer force of personality and the support of my wife, who knew that everything surrounding my case had a lot of multiple truths to it. It's really that, and is the reason that I'm here today. It's a very difficult thing to have the sort of civil disability that I have, which I share with 8% of Americans, and 25% of Americans have a criminal record. And, you get to a point where you look at that and you go, when 25% of the citizens in your country have a criminal record, you probably have too many laws. That's probably what the problem is. It's not that you have 25% of the people are criminals. It's just that there are too many damn laws, and so I'm against that.
So criminal justice reform would probably be a big priority for you.
That's a huge thing, and I can do that at a granular level because I mastered the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and I mastered federal criminal law. So I know where all the Achilles heels are in the system. So it's interesting. Joe Biden is the guy who spearheaded the new Jim Crow, and he's winning now because of black people voting for him. But he is the guy who partnered up with Ted Kennedy.
Well, old black people. Young black people are overwhelmingly supporting Bernie Sanders, not Joe Biden.
The problem with young black people.
The problem is the boomers.
Yeah. But here's the difference. The boomers vote. The young people stay home. Mm-hmm. So Sanders needs people from 18 to 30 to vote for him, and only 13% of those people were voting. And that's why Sanders is losing. Young people don't vote. They think they're doing something on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but those votes don't count. And so as a result, Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. And he is the guy who he sponsored what became the United States sentencing guidelines. So back in the late 80s, the Congress delegated its authority to make sentencing laws to the federal judiciary. So it's actually federal judges who write the federal sentencing guidelines manual, which creates mandatory rules that send everybody to prison for a long time. But I actually learned where the Achilles heels are in that system. For example, there's a law, Title 18, Section 3661, that allows the government to bring anything it wants into a sentencing hearing. So if you plead guilty to, say, selling marijuana, if you were to go to trial, the burden of proof would be beyond a reasonable doubt. But the minute you plead guilty, which is what 90% of people in the federal system do, the burden of proof drops to preponderance of the evidence at your sentencing hearing. So the most important hearing of your life, the burden of proof is the lowest that we have in our system. Stephen Colbert, on his old Colbert Report, once referred to preponderance of the evidence as flipping a coin plus 1%. And that's really a good metaphor. So what happens at a federal sentencing hearing under preponderance of the evidence? There are no rules of evidence. There are no rules of procedure. There are no rules that prevent double, triple, quintuple hearsay. So here you are, you've pled guilty to selling a little bit of marijuana, but now a DEA agent tells a cop, who tells your probation officer, who tells the prosecutor or tells the FBI agent, who tells the prosecutor that you once said you could sell a kilo of cocaine. So the prosecutor puts that FBI agent up on the stand. The judge, who in all probability is a former prosecutor, believes the FBI agent. They all work in the same building. Mm-hmm. And now you get sentenced as if you pled guilty to marijuana and cocaine. And that is done under a doctrine called relevant conduct, which is United States Sentencing Guideline 1B1.3. So you got all that shit working against you in a sentencing hearing. And then on the flip side, in Chapter 5H of the United States Sentencing Guidelines Manual, they forbid defendants to bring in things that are usually brought into a sentencing hearing in mitigation. So somebody who say is Joe Biden's age, right, and has been convicted of a crime, he's going to say, hey, I'm old. I've served my country my whole life as a senator and a vice president. I raised a good family. I've never been in trouble. This is my first time. These are all the things that would normally bring in. The federal sentencing guidelines forbid that. They forbid judges to consider those things. And so what you have is this conviction system which coerces people into pleading guilty. And then at sentencing, it's just Kafkaesque. And this is why they don't allow cameras in federal courtrooms. If people could see this stuff playing out every day, if they could see how antiseptic a federal sentencing hearing is, where you have both the prosecution and the defense going in, arguing about amounts, only about amounts. They argue about amounts of money and amounts of drugs. And there's a scale. So they have a heroin scale that points to years based on the amount, a marijuana scale that points to years based on amount, a fraud scale that points to years based on the amount of money. In my case, there was no money lost, but at the time that I was sentenced, they didn't consider actual loss. They considered the amount of money you borrowed, and then they just sentenced you based on that. They didn't deduct the collateral you pledged. They didn't deduct the money you paid back. It was just the face value of the loans. That's how they did it back when I was sentenced, because the federal sentencing guidelines were brand new and they were being applied in a very square manner. Mm-hmm. And now it's less square, but it's still really crazy, this amount sentencing that we have. And it doesn't consider the human beings, and it reduces judges to calculators, And some of these judges are really smart, and they protest in their written opinions, but, they keep showing up for work. And that's kind of the problem. If we had, as a libertarian president, I would be appointing libertarian judges, and you would see the law change in the United States really fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of stuff could you do, though? What would you do as president to reform that system, other than just appoint libertarian judges? Like, would you veto some laws, pardon some people?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you're going to pardon you're going to pardon anybody who is actually in a cage for something nonviolent. That's a no-brainer. But the other thing is, some of these laws.
What about violent political prisoners? People who are political prisoners.
Yeah,
such as Black Panthers, AIM activists, and stuff like that have been, locked in jail for self-defense against the government.
Absolutely, those people deserve to be released. These people are heroes that go out and put their bodies on the line, and people there are a lot of people in prison for doing what is claimed to be violent, when all they're doing is, in many cases, they provide the slightest resistance, and that becomes the thing that defines a whole criminal case. And it's not just that they have to be in prison; it's that they have to be a convicted felon the rest of their lives. And that really is, having a felony conviction. If you're 30 years old and you get locked up for 5 years, that 5 years is nothing compared to the next 35 years you're going to spend until you're 70 with a felony conviction, because your options are so drastically narrowed. It takes you out of commerce, and recidivism is built into the system. I mean, so many of our prisons are for-profit prisons. They're traded on Wall Street. People like Felicity Huffman own stock in these prisons, and they use that money to bribe their kids into USC. I mean, it's really, really bad. But I also can use the power of the pen to say, hey, I'm not signing any budget unless these laws I just talked to you about are repealed, and we return the justice system to the federal justice system to a situation where what I tried to do with my software, where everybody goes in being able to see all the law. You don't have these lopsided tools being provided to the government, and you don't have strict liability laws. What Ed Snowden and I were charged with are strict liability laws. So what I did is I gave the bank tax returns that accurately reflected my income, but I hadn't filed the returns with IRS. So the fact that I caused a document to be inserted into the bank's files that are not what it appears to be, that's the crime. And today, that's a Class B felony. You can get up to 30 years. When I was convicted of it, you could only get up to 5 years. It has nothing to do with whether you get the money, whether money is paid back, nothing to do with that. It's strictly having this document. So there's no defense to it, is what I'm saying. I can't say in a criminal arena that the bank could not have possibly relied on that tax return because it didn't provide evidence of any ability to pay back $2 million in loans. And that argument worked in bankruptcy court. I got a complete discharge, and the judge laughed us out of court. He's like, this is a joke. You guys are idiots for loaning this idiot all that money. You're an idiot for asking. You deserve each other. Get out of my courtroom. Mm-hmm. But in the criminal arena, you can't say that. So with Ed Snowden is charged with another strict liability crime. Ed Snowden, all the government has to show is that Ed Snowden took stuff he wasn't meant to take, right? Ed Snowden cannot come back here from Russia and turn to a jury and say, yes, but I took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Fourth Amendment. He's not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to put on a defense. And he has said many times that if the government would let me do that, I would come back. But the reason they won't do that is the real story of Ed Snowden is not that we found out the government was recording and data mining all of our personal data and warehousing it. That's not the story. The story is that Ed Snowden embarrassed the national security state because he was one guy with a high school education that hoodwinked the entire deep state and walked out the door with their most sensitive secrets, thereby exposing them for being completely incompetent and useless.
Mm-hmm.
That's the story. That's why they're after Ed Snowden.
Well, also, we already knew that they were spying on us. That had came out before. What was it?
Right.
Like AT&T room, whatever. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but that all came out that AT&T was recording everything for the government.
That is very true.
Years ago. Ed Snowden, he did kind of how big it is. Sure, he kind of exposed how big it is, but it was all stuff that, all of us knew already. Anyone who is shocked by what Ed Snowden revealed hasn't been paying attention. And sure, there's a lot of people that don't pay attention, but it was none of it was new information.
Well, I think Apple was shocked by it. They've done things to what Apple has done has put processes in place that pretty much exempts Apple from the third-party doctrine. So if the government issues a warrant for your hard copy files that you keep at home in a filing cabinet, you know about that because that warrant gets served on you. If they issue a warrant to a third party, you don't know that because that is the nature of the third party doctrine. So I think what Apple has tried to do, and certainly what I would advocate as president, is that these big platforms where we back up our files on the cloud, that those files be exempt from the third party doctrine, such that if the government is going to subpoena these files from Apple or Google or any of these tech companies, you get a copy of that warrant. You get a copy of that and you know about it, just like you would if they were subpoenaing a hard copy in 1975.
Well, what would be, I don't know, you probably know the case law better than a lot of people here since you run a whole company based on that, but what about like for example, if a bank, you have a safe deposit box at a bank, right? Would they be able to then, under the third-party rule, and search your safety deposit box?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Your safety deposit boxes, the contents in those boxes are not insured by FDIC. If the bank gets broken into and people get into your safe deposit box, you're out of luck. It really is just all the safe deposit boxes. All you're getting for it is a more secure place than you have at home, and
not secure from government warrants, though.
Not secure from government warrants. If the government knows that you have a safe deposit box, they can issue a subpoena to the bank. The bank is obligated to unlock the safe deposit box and let the government in, and you would not know about it.
Yeah. So
your question actually hammers home the point I'm making about these tech companies in that wherever our property is located, we should have notice from the government pursuant to the Fourth Amendment, right, that they are accessing our property. That is just basic. And that principle has been eviscerated by Republican and Democratic judges. And what they've done is, if you look at the Fourth Amendment, the problematic word in the Fourth Amendment is the word unreasonable. We don't have the word unreasonable in the First Amendment. The First Amendment creates anarchy in the United States with regard to speech, religion, press, assembly, and association. The Second Amendment creates anarchy in the United States with regard to firearms. And I agree when people say that permits and all these other conditions to having a firearm are unconstitutional. That's true, but it's also true that if you want to have a house full of guns in the United States, you can do it. So those unambiguous amendments have worked, whereas the Fourth Amendment, which contains the word unreasonable, the judges and lawyers have just taken that word and run with it, and they've basically used that word to say that anything a citizen would want is unreasonable, and anything the government wants is completely reasonable. That is like a 10-word summary of the case law on the Fourth Amendment right now.
Mm-hmm. So basically, the Fourth Amendment's broken based on the word unreasonable. So would you push for maybe striking that word from the Fourth Amendment as president?
Yes. Yeah, I can go right down the list with you of what my constitutional convention would be. And let me just set this up this way, right? Because Adam Kokesh has quite a following. And Adam, as he's been very clear, wants to just, roll up the entire federal government. So when I say to people that, included in Adam's idea is repealing the Bill of Rights, which includes the First and Second Amendment. And whenever I talk to a group of libertarians, just a generic group of libertarians, and I say we need to have a constitutional convention, the biggest objection I get is, yes, but we're afraid we'll lose our Second Amendment rights. And yet Adam has managed to get a tremendous amount of support for this. And a lot of Adam's supporters say, you don't get your rights from a piece of paper. And that is true as far as it goes, because all rights are natural rights. We all agree on that.
Oh, I don't agree rights exist.
Okay, well, tell me about that, because I haven't heard anybody say that before. So put some meat on the bones there. I'll hear you out.
Well, basically, all rights that we would call rights are just what you can defend yourself. No piece of paper, no government, no other agency can possibly defend anything that you're not defending yourself.
Right.
So the only rights you have are what you exert with your own might. You could accomplish a whole lot more with a fistful of might than a whole bag of rights.
Okay.
Basically, to be very, very short about it.
Yeah. So directionally and philosophically, I'm completely with you on that, because, as an entrepreneur and an artist and someone who has lived his life working from a blank page, my wife needs structure. She needs to have structure in order to operate. I operate much better with no structure. I love it. My favorite thing to do is take a blank piece of paper and fill it in and try to create something with it. So you and I really are on the same page. So
are you familiar with the anti-federalist argument against including a Bill of Rights in the Constitution?
Yes.
Where they were saying that the government should just be or no, that was actually the Federalist argument, not the Anti-Federalist argument. The Anti-Federalist argument was that the government was going to go beyond the scope of government anyway. The Federalists, they argued that that the government would only do the enumerated powers, which obviously they have.
Well, let me just jump back for a second to the point I wanted to make about the Second Amendment, because here's what I would say to you is this. If you are the only person, and I'm not even going to use the word citizen, but if you're the only human being within what we call the United States of America right now, who wants to have a house full of guns, and I'm the president, and all 300 million of the other human beings in this country are against you, the Second Amendment commands me to defend you. That's what it commands me to do as president. So it's not that your rights come from the piece of paper. It's that if I'm the president, that piece of paper secures your individual rights, even if the entire mob is against you.
Well, are you familiar with Lysander Spooner at all?
I am not.
All right, Lysander Spooner, he was a lawyer back in the 1800s who read himself into the law back when you could do that. He didn't believe that you should have to go to get all the nonsense.
You still can in Vermont, Utah, and California.
In some states. But he was a big activist on that, and he wrote a whole argument about the Constitution. And one of the points is he said, this is a quote. But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either allowed a government such as we have had, or it has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it's unfit to exist. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of truth in that statement. I also think there's a big difference between the administrative state, which is given birth to by Article 1, Section 8, and the Bill of Rights, which commands me as a president to protect you. And I think the world we live in requires us to be able to multitask. So the flip side of Adam Kokesh is Jacob Hornberger, who I've heard say many times, if he could push a button and get rid of Social Security tomorrow, he would do it. But Jacob's focus is mainly on railing against the administrative state. Adam is like, let's throw out the whole thing. And I'm like, are you sure? I'm like, are you sure? Because, and that's just based on my personal experience. I'm not judging anybody, right? But my personal experience is that in my life, that Bill of Rights saved my ass. It allowed me to go up against the biggest law firm in the world, unlock the door to a federal prison. It's allowed me to create an amazing business for my family that does a social good. It taught me a lesson about financial literacy that I've been able to impart to my sons so that they could become self-millionaires by the time they were 35 by just understanding how to use their money. So, one of the things I've learned in performing my show Fool for a Client around the country for, by and large, Democrat and Republican audiences who come into the theater authoritarian, and 90 minutes later, they're on their feet cheering the libertarian life story, is that I've learned that if you communicate at a high level, you can remind people who spend their lives doing jobs that you would never do, like being a federal prosecutor. You can remind them of principles that they forgot they believed in, principles that you and I share. And I wouldn't say that I've become sensitive to them, but I would say that I have become a better listener in that I really just want to hear the person's story about why they are the way they are, how they ended up where they are. What are these societal pressures that cause, parents who went to an Ivy League school to have so much anxiety that from the time the egg is fertilized, they're planning on getting that kid into an Ivy League school, that this is the only path. And that kid obviously is on a path to be a federal prosecutor or a federal judge or a federal bureaucrat, or, Lincoln Chafee's parents named him Lincoln. I mean, that's very cynical. They knew what he had to be, and he became that. So I'm really interested in these stories, because I believe things that the vast majority of people don't believe. You believe things that probably even a bigger majority of people don't believe. And I'm interested in these stories. I get a lot of insight into people from listening, and I think it helps me be a better communicator, a better person, and it gives me the confidence to run for president and feel like I can coexist with these people and do some good.
Okay. So what do you think? I mean, a lot of libertarians, they think that, we're going to go all the way and just win the presidency right off the get-go without taking any seats in Congress and Senate and all that. Not wanting to actually like build up the, the lower offices infrastructure first. What do you think about that strategy of, the whole all in on the president without trying to, take some seats in the House and Senate first?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I think. The people in the House and Senate don't vote for president. The people do. And I think that governorships in big states and the presidency are unique animals. I think the office of the president is the most libertarian office. It is in the country by far, because of the obligations the Bill of Rights imposes on the individual who happens to be president. We're unfamiliar with those obligations because we don't see authoritarian Republican and Democratic presidents executing on those obligations. But as a libertarian president, I would return the separation of powers between the executive and the legislature immediately. I would execute on those obligations in absolute terms. So the legislative branch that you refer to is made up of 535 people. The federal judiciary is made up of about 830 people. The executive branch is made up of one person, and the Libertarian Party has ballot access that is identical to the Republicans and Democrats, to the most libertarian office in the land. So my question is, why would you not lean into that? And so I reject anybody that says we need to be realistic. I say no, and I can only speak for myself. I am fully committed. One of the reasons that, Jacob Hornberger had such a hard time in Iowa when I said to him, how are you going to make Trump your bitch? Is because he's a very realistic, ordinary person who's led a very ordinary life, and he doesn't imagine himself on the debate stage with Donald Trump. He doesn't imagine himself making Donald Trump his bitch. Whereas I know that if I'm the nominee, I'll be doing all the late night shows. I'll be doing stand up. Gary Johnson got invited to host SNL in 2016 and turned it down. I wouldn't turn it down. And I believe that the American people want to see a third person in the debates. And when they see me, they're gonna especially want to see me up there making Donald Trump my bitch. And it could be that if that happens, you end up with a Jesse Ventura model, where somebody who is an accomplished public speaker and has the confidence and the knowledge to go on that stage and own two douchebags actually becomes the president. Jesse Ventura became the governor through that exact path.
Mm-hmm.
So there is precedent for it. There's precedent for it.
That is true. Now, as Jesse Ventura pointed out when he won, they took him, into a back dark room and told him, listen, this is how it's going to go. How are you going to handle something like that?
I say, go fuck yourself and suck my balls.
All right, well, that's
good.
I
say, how about we unlock the door of this back room and we go do this right in front of Congress? Let's go do that, you mother Jacobers. How about we do that? Why don't we do that? Why do we need to be in a back room? Or is that just how you assholes have been operating the last 150 years? Guess what, dickheads? Those days are done. I'm going to advertise your ass because guess what? I've had a recorder going the whole time. So you're on camera in about 30 seconds. So brace yourself, motherfuckers.
It's funny because Bill Hicks, he did a stand-up routine where he said that that's probably what happens when people are elected president. And then Jesse Ventura, when he was elected governor, confirmed that happened to him when he was elected governor.
Bill Hicks was brilliant. He's one of my favorite comedians. He was so incredibly anti-authority, and I share that. I mean, I hate authority. I hate it, and I cannot get a single one of my libertarian opponents to say those words. I hear them say, "Oh, we should like liberty for liberty's sake," but Hornberger's got a book called "My Passion for Liberty." It's like if you don't hate authority, you have zero passion for liberty, right? Mm-hmm. Or you might have, or your passion runs an inch deep and a mile wide. You have to first and foremost hate authority. You have, in order to have self-government, in order to be able to experiment in life and go out and try things and fail better next time and try again and fail better next time. Life is a process of elimination. It's at its highest level. Life is just one big long experiment. And you're constantly trying to do things that are difficult to push yourself harder. This devotion that I've taken on of running for president, this is a very impractical thing to do. There's nothing practical about it. It's just that you trust people to make the right decision. And I believe that if I am confident in who I am on stage, and I can sincerely convince a majority, delegates in Austin that I'm doing this for the best reasons, that I want to see good things happen. And that, to your point, to the question you just asked, you realize a president is authorized to declassify anything. So that's the power a president has over Congress. It's like, you guys are putting the arm on me? Fine, I'll just have my staff go through all the shit you've pulled, and we'll declassify the most incendiary stuff. And we'll see how many of you assholes get reelected.
Well, yeah, that would be good. Declassify all the documents about all the CIA operations they've
Absolutely.
done all over the world.
The president can totally do that. The president can declassify anything. And that's one of the big threats a libertarian president has. But you have to have a libertarian president with the balls to do it. And I'm the only candidate running for this nomination that has those balls. I showed in Florida that when the mob is against me, I will stand up. I did my little 2 minutes down there in Florida, and they sat on their hands. I thought to myself, okay, you assholes, that's how this is going to be. I'm going to come at you every time I get a question. Every question they ask me the rest of this night, it doesn't matter what the topic is, the answer is going to be private sector censorship.
Mm-hmm. Well, about private sector censorship, that does seem to be a huge problem. There are, all of our lives have moved to be online, virtually.
That is the reality.
A lot of people don't even leave the house for work. There's a lot of people who telecommute. A lot of people who, there's a lot of at home on the internet stuff. A lot of our communication is done on the internet. Our discussion of ideas are done on the internet, and they're all done on these, various platforms. And, that is concerning, that you have ideas that are being censored and manipulated with, algorithms and such.
And it's the ideas that they zoom in on, right? So Aunt Becky there, who bribed her kid to get into USC, her kid was a genius on YouTube. That kid started a YouTube business when she was 14. She knew what she wanted to do from a young age. She showed up every week, twice a week, like clockwork, doing videos about how to put on makeup. And when I covered that story for my podcast, I would do a 1 hour podcast. I'd spend 40 or 50 hours preparing it. That kid was a genius. She put makeup on better than anybody. I was sitting there mesmerized watching her put on makeup and talk about putting on makeup. She had 2 million subscribers to her YouTube show when Aunt Becky bribed her into college. She had 10 different contracts and private label contracts with all the big makeup companies. But she wasn't being censored because she wasn't talking about politics. The people who are being censored are people who have political opinions that are not in compliance with the doctrine that comes out of Silicon Valley, LA, New York, and Washington, D.C. We all know that. The show I did yesterday, Drunk and Disorderly, they complained of the same thing. So if you are, if you're an anarchist, if you're a libertarian, we're all citizens. We all have, whether you think the Bill of Rights should be there or not, the fact of the matter is the 14th Amendment requires equal protection of the law and access to justice for all citizens. The First Amendment is absolute on that political speech is the most protected of all speech. The Republican and Democratic judges over more than 200 years have been rock solid on that. So because of that, the Libertarian Party was able to start in 1972 and eventually get to the point where it had ballot access in all 50 states, which is amazing for a political party that only takes in $1.5 million a year. It's like one of the biggest entrepreneurial achievements in the public or private sector of all time. So here we are now. We have that status, and then we have the efficient distribution system of the internet that allows candidates to get involved and run for short money. They can run for short money. I'm thinking of going all virtual with the coronavirus because I'm over 60. And I have a history when I get a cold, it turns into, low-level pneumonia. And my job right now is to hang out at airports, get on airplanes, hang out at hotels, and shake the hand of every person in the room who also just did the same thing. And I'm starting to feel a little bit at risk. Mm-hmm. But to just get back to my point, we are disturbing the universe. We libertarians. Alex Jones was disturbing the universe. He was a prolific communicator. And I was not a fan of Alex Jones, but I'm a fan of the fact that he showed up every day and did what he did. And I'm not a fan of the fact that all of these 4 or 5 tech companies that have more money than most nation states got together in one day. They, in a coordinated effort, on the same day, they deplatformed this guy. And the message I took away from that as a political satirist was I immediately started self-censoring myself. So censorship is what happens at the end of Alex Jones. But when you censor Alex Jones, you censor everybody, because now I'm thinking, okay, if I create a YouTube video or a podcast that says Alex Jones, when their robots transcribe that podcast and they sing the term Alex Jones, am I going to get deplatformed, or is this show going to get deplatformed? And the reason you think that is because it happens. It's been happening. And the algorithms are not transparent. We have no idea how they're doing it. I would be willing to stipulate, for the sake of argument, that Jack Dorsey is against that happening at Twitter. But we all know intuitively that the people, the programmers who are working behind the wall at Twitter are by and large voting Democrat. They're very smart. They're among the smartest people in the world, and they're highly motivated politically. So any advantage they can get without being discovered, they're going to get it. We just know that because we're human and we have logic. So do we want to live in a world where libertarians, anarchists, or whatever you believe, right? There's no test for what people believe. You're free to believe whatever you want. You're free to advertise it and promote it as long as it's done peacefully. Do you want to live in a world where when you promote your next meeting, you're doing it with an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and a push pin on a community bulletin board? Or do you want to have the same access to these distribution systems that that Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity have? Okay, I want the latter. And whatever we have to do to get to that, we have to do that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, there's people that have called for like making Twitter a public utility, for example. What do you think about a move like that?
I think that the first thing you do is you repeal Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which immunizes these platforms from being sued for what they carry on their platform. So what that does is that creates an atmosphere where other people can now compete. Because right now, because of Section 230, these platforms are immunized from what they carry. So it allows them to carry anything. So that allowed them to become very big, so that because they don't have any liability for what they do. And so that allows them to become an operating system. Whereas if you take that law away, you could have a separate platform where all people do is talk about politics, and it's guaranteed not to be censored because that's their sales pitch. But right now, what we have is companies like Facebook and Twitter being able to have it both ways. They have protection from liability in litigation, but then they also have the market power to impose on us terms of service agreements that are in flat contradiction to the terms of citizenship. In other words, the term of service agreement that we are in a de facto way forced to agree to says that they can remove us for any reason or no reason at all. If we don't like it, we can't go to court. We have to agree to binding arbitration. And the Supreme Court just ruled that if you agree to binding arbitration, you can never participate in a class action suit in open court, which is a public record and public accountability. So we, the citizens, we, the people, are really boxed in here. And I don't want to see my party become a debate society. I want to see my party become competitive. And that's why I'm trying to model that kind of leadership for people. And I'm saying, no, don't listen to people like Jacob Hornberger that get on stage and say, we need to be realistic. We're not going to win. Just be unrealistic. Just use your imagination. If you imagine winning the Oval Office and you fall short by getting on the debate stage, well, that cures a lot of problems. That gets a lot of eyeballs. That gets more people in the party. And more people in the party means more and better arguments. It means we all make each other better. You know, what you said today, there are no rights. That's something I'm going to be thinking about all week, and I want to try to find the truth in that statement, and because it makes me better to be able to do that. And then I also want to come up with an argument against it and make that to you another day, and then make you better. And then when everything is better, the party's better, the country's better, everything's better when people are able to compete on a level playing field. And it may be counterintuitive for libertarians to think about being involved in these private sector operating systems, but these operating systems, these digital operating systems, have replaced the printing press, they've replaced the typewriter, they've replaced the personal computer that wasn't networked. That was fair. This right now is not fair. And we have a lot of smart people in our party that if they're so motivated, we could come up with genius solutions and really be leading on this, because everybody wants to be able to have citizen journalism. Everybody wants that. The only people who don't are incumbent Republicans and Democrats. Everybody else is all for it.
Well, what about doing something like taking the power away from the corporations that run these platforms, and removing all the regulations that protect them, and
that's what I was talking
about.
Section 230.
And,
they get a protection. Absolutely.
And then move towards like more open source, free and open source alternatives to the big social media companies. If we could get a mass exodus off of Facebook, off of Twitter, off of YouTube, and move towards decentralized open source platforms that are built by the communities that use them. Whoever wants to contribute can contribute. Type
Absolutely.
of a thing.
That's what Bitcoin is. So I mean, if you take away the protections that these companies have bought they'll tell you fair and square from Congress. If you take those protections away, what you do is you open up the world to an incredible amount of entrepreneurism, and you end up with all these niche platforms, and that ultimately is a much better system, and it also gets us out of the simulation that we're in now, because if I put something on Facebook that says Jacob Hornberger is a mother Jacober. If I write that on Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg's algorithm is designed to go out and find the people who are going to be most angry by that statement. And those are the comments you're going to see. And that is just a simulation based on an algorithm that's created to generate the most clicks so they can have the most advertising. It's not reality. There are plenty of people who agree with me, but they're going to be the last to show up. The people who are going to show up are the people who disagree, because conflict creates a lot more tension than agreement. And the psychologists, the psychiatrists who work for Mark Zuckerberg, who are the best in the world, they know that.
What do you think about repealing the Wagner Act, which prevents unions from being able to do many types of strikes and prevents, what they've deemed, important stuff to even be able to strike at all? What do you think about repealing that law to allow, the working class to be able to kind of fight back against the corporate oligarchs?
Absolutely. Yeah, you and I are very much on the same page on these things where you're talking about, populism and populists and people getting together. So, the Republicans are very much against any kind of collective bargaining. I'm all about people getting together and freely entering into, whatever contracts they want to enter into, as individuals to each other or as groups of people to each other, or however they decide to do it. And then, go to employers, go to your big corporations and say, we've gotten together and these are some things that we'd like to see, and try to have a reasonable conversation with people and use whatever leverage you have as a group to advance your lot in life. That's tremendous. And it is libertarianism 101. And what the people will discover in that, just the people going through that exercise, right? Think about all the individual growth that they have just going through that exercise. They're going to improve their leadership skills. They're going to find out where they fall short in their ability to communicate and persuade. They're going to learn where they need to improve, and they're going to learn about the limits of their persuasion, and they're going to learn about how sometimes you need to be practical and compromise. So you got your top three things, and you push as hard as you can for those top three things. You end up getting one of those top three things. Maybe you get number two. You don't get number one and number three, but you come away learning that if you hadn't committed fully, to getting those three things, you never would have got the number two. So you improve things, and then you go back again in a few months, and you make a better argument because you're better because of the effort. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about, right? It's all about merit. And if I can't get something on the merits, like one of the things I never do when I'm out at these presidential debates, I never vote for myself, ever. All my fellow candidates vote for themselves. I'm the only one who doesn't. I never vote for myself. I don't want to skew the count. Of course I'm going to vote for myself. I don't vote for anyone else, but I'm not going to skew the numbers by voting for myself, because that's not meritorious.
Mm-hmm. So are you familiar with the concept of bottom unity that some people within the Libertarian Party, myself included, have been pushing to unite libertarians from, across, because as we know, libertarians there's left libertarians, right libertarians. Generally, the Libertarian Party has been pretty dominated by not just right libertarians, but in particular, very far right libertarians.
Yeah.
What do you think about expanding that?
If you want to unite libertarians, you go down to Florida and call Jacob Hornberger a motherfucker. That unites them real fast. I united the entire room for 2 hours. I don't think I've never done that before. I do stand up. There's always some people not laughing. There's others laughing. I get a standing ovation. There's always some people sitting. When I make an audience cry, there's always some people not crying. I united that entire room for 2 hours, and I was actually very proud of myself. I slept like a baby that night. But everyone else is very upset. But I was like, God damn, that was cool. I had the best time. So yeah. I just happen to believe, consistent with the point I just made about unions, is that I really believe when people are animated and informed and they're smart and they're well read, like a lot of us libertarians are, and they have opinions, when I hear people arguing with each other, it sounds like freedom to me. It doesn't really bother me. And I would say that in the context of someone who completely discounts 100% anything that is said on Twitter or Facebook. You have to completely discount that, because that is 100% assimilation, and you cannot consider that as anything approaching reality. And the truth of that is borne out whenever as someone who posts on Facebook if I post something on Facebook, it's usually because I'm A/B testing something to see if I get some laughs or to see if it gets people particularly animated. I'll go, okay, that's hot. I'll use that in a debate. But when I actually go out to the three-dimensional debate with people in the room, everyone is nice to each other. Everybody's gracious. Everybody's kind. Candidates get on stage. They do their business. They get off stage. We're nice to each other. So it's nothing like online. So you have to discount everything you're seeing on social media in terms of evaluating how much the party is divided. You have to completely discount that and go only with your one-on-one human experiences. And I say that as a guy who's been an algorithm salesman now for 20 years. I know what algorithms can do, and they can create an alternate reality. And that's exactly what happens on Facebook and Twitter.
Well, the most important challenge that libertarians are probably going to end up coming with this election to be able to get a significant chunk of the votes is to be able to outreach to the disenfranchised progressives who are going to be extremely upset that Bernie Sanders is getting robbed by a blatantly rigged primary.
Absolutely.
The Democratic Party is out in the open rigging it. You have exit polls.
They're blatant about it. They're blatant about it.
Yeah. It's insane. So what would be some strategies you would have to outreach to progressives that wouldn't traditionally even look at the Libertarian Party? How would you outreach to them and win them over, get their votes?
Okay, so
maybe even get them to stick around and become libertarians.
Absolutely. So the way we get hundreds of millions of people paying attention to the libertarian message is for me to be the nominee and get on Jimmy Kimmel and do a type 5 of Dave Chappelle level stand-up, do my mockery and my parody of Donald Trump, which always gets laughs. Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so great. And I actually look like Trump a little. And then Kimmel's going to have me sit down. He's going to get a big kick out of it. And the other late night shows are going to want me on. And then on top of that, right, I want to use this face, my face. Everybody's seen my what we call in my campaign the Mount Rushmore shot, right? This face looks like it should be carved into Mount Rushmore. When Trump and Sanders supporters see my face on Facebook, my page gets about 15,000 hits a day, and about 10,000 of those hits come from Trump and Sanders reporters. When they see my face, they get triggered by it. All they know is my face, and they're like, God damn, that guy looks like a president. Where did he come from? And then someone goes, oh, he's from California. And then some other Trump supporter goes, oh, I bet he's got Nancy Pelosi on speed dial. They really get triggered by it. So beyond this, I have this family, my wife and sons, they look like they came from the first family factory. So I want to use the imagery of my family to troll the entire country and get them to just look at that picture and go, oh, wow, look at them. Look how normal these libertarians are. They're nothing like us. I'm going to just vote for that family. And then they're going to find out that we are, in fact, hardcore libertarian, that I want to take the federal budget and cut it from the federal budget right now is $400 a week per household. That's what it costs to operate. So 200 of that a week is collected in taxes. The other 200 is borrowed. So I will not sign any budget that's not balanced. I want to get the federal budget down from 400 a week to 100 a week, and you pay as you go, because that's how my family rolls. We don't do debt. We don't pay interest. We don't borrow money. We pay as you go. We bootstrap. So what can you get in a federal government for $100 a week? That's my question. Right now, it's costing $400 a week. 200 of that is borrowed. That ends on day one. That is done. Not signing any budget where you're printing pretend money to bolster up your phony economy. And I want it to be 25% of what it is. And believe me, I understand that this is aspirational, but what I'm trying to impart here is a conversation that I can have with all of America, to get them to understand what's being done to them, to get them to understand how the system in place is robbing people of their future, that it's designed to do that. It's not an insane system. It's a well-oiled machine that's designed to do exactly what it's doing. And because of my experience, my experience in the law over the last 30 years, first as a defendant, then as an entrepreneur who sells the law to lawyers, and someone who has experienced life under the new Jim Crow, someone who's experienced mass incarceration, someone who's sued a president to end a foreign civil war, I am in a great position to communicate these principles and to do it at the highest possible level, beginning with stand-up comedy. There are about 1,000 people running for president right now. There are no Republicans, no Democrats, no Libertarians, nobody in the Green Party who can do what I'm talking about.
All right, where can people find more information about your campaign? Where can they learn how to, help out?
MarkWhitney.com is the hub, and we're good on finances for now. We've got what we need to get through this campaign, but what we're looking for is volunteers to help us make phone calls to delegates, and anybody who feels like they may have the time to do that. We've got a system that we're putting in place beginning next week. And I am going to personally call every delegate and have a conversation with them on the phone between now and Austin. I hope there is a convention. I think there's a really good chance there won't be a convention. Out here in California, the Golden State Warriors are playing NBA games with nobody in the stands. They're not allowing people to come to the games. LibertyCon was canceled yesterday. That's the biggest Liberty event for students. It's the biggest event in the campaign. I qualified for it. There were going to be about 2,000 students in the audience at the Marriott Marquis in D.C. at the convention center there. It was going to be on C-SPAN. That event has been canceled because of the virus. So if we get to a point where this campaign needs to be virtual or digital, I've got a $50,000 studio here in San Diego that I built that I'm very prepared to campaign from. And if it does go that way, I wouldn't want to have to compete against me, because we can do that at a pretty high level here. We've got great production abilities, and we can just be pushing out content every day. We've got almost 500,000 email addresses in our database that we haven't even used yet.
All right. So what was that website again?
MarkWhitney.com. That's Mark Whitney with a K.com. And if you go to MarkWhitney.com and you click on memoir, you can watch my award-winning one-man show called Fool for a Client, which was so well done that it got me on the cover of Story magazine with Russell Brand and Drew Carey. And that show, Fool for a Client, most people who watch it, about 75% of the people who watch it will be voting for me #1 in Austin, because you watch that show and you can just see that this stuff runs through my DNA, that I'm not trying to sell books. I'm not doing controlled opposition for the Republicans, that I'm just a guy who, dug a big hole in my 20s, dug out in my 30s, rebuilt my 40s, killed it in my 50s. And I'm here to help during my 60s. I want to do good things. I want to build this party up. I want to train and recruit an army of candidates and activists, and get rid of these mobsters that have been running this show for way too long.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. And for all those listening out there, make sure you hashtag please donate to the Patreon. Make sure you subscribe to the Not Safe for Work Snapchat. See me commit OSHA violations. Definitely hashtag please donate and join the LP. If you're wanting to come on in, if you're down with the bottom unity, go to lp.org/podcast. Titles are a spook, and nice spook, stirred.